Sure. Well, first, thanks for everybody being here this morning. It's good to see you, and we are at our second off day of preseason camp already. It feels like we just got started, but the way preseasons are structured now, it's a lot different than the old days where the guys would show up and you'd immediately jump into 2-a-days or maybe even 3-a-days. I actually like the way preseason is laid out now because you basically have one practice a day, one walkthrough a day, plenty of time for meetings and weight training and team bonding. And the guys get these little sporadic breaks, which I think are good to let them clear their head. So today on an off day, we'll have a team meeting, position meeting, special teams meeting, but it gives the coaches a chance to get organized and prepare for the next several days. You also start off in helmets and then work into shoulder pads, and then finally yesterday we had our first day in full pads where we got a chance to have some actual live tackling in practice. Pleased with the growth and development so far, and I think a lot of that in part is due to the fantastic job that our strength and conditioning staff did with these guys this summer. So the fact that basically our entire team was here all summer means that when preseason starts, you know they're in shape, you know they're in great physical condition, and we are allowed to work with our team a couple hours a week as coaches now by NCAA rules. So when you start practice one, it's not as if you are literally putting in your day one installation. The guys have already done that stuff and have been working on it for a good bit of the summer. So it's more about hitting the ground running and cleaning up some stuff that you've already done. Obviously, things move at a different speed and a different pace once you get everybody on the field and the pads go on. I did think yesterday was probably our cleanest and most competitive practice so far, which was good to see. In the first day in pads, there was no hesitancy. I think our guys attacked it. It was a good physical practice. And then these walkthroughs that we have been doing in the evenings have been very positive because it gives us a chance to get a lot of things cleaned up and a lot of good mental reps and a lot of good teaching relative to situations and just how we expect to go about our business as a team. So I like these guys a lot. They're very passionate. They're very committed. I think they're a close-knit team. They are humble. They know we have a lot of work to do, a lot of work ahead of us, but you can see that there's a zeal about them, and we need to keep inspiring them as coaches. You know, they inspire me because of their passion and their energy and their want to, and we just need to keep working together here in the coming days and weeks to get things in the right place so that we can come out on August 29th and put a good performance out there on the field for our fans. Yeah, it's been pretty good. The normal bumps and bruises. What we did see, ironically, in the first few days of practice is it was pretty hot and muggy, and so we were really having to force the hydration on the guys. As hard as they worked out all summer, it was a pretty mild summer, and then all of a sudden, you know, you get a pretty significant heat wave that first week of practice, plus the anxiety, the natural anxiety of preseason camp starting and adrenaline, you know, rushing and so forth. So there were some guys that maybe had a little bit more, you know, heat-related stuff, nothing significant to a point where, you know, anybody was off the field for a lot of time, but just mostly awareness that, hey, it's going to get hot here too. And, you know, and now, of course, we've got tornadoes rolling through town and all kinds of crazy stuff. So our guys literally made it into the building yesterday at 4 o'clock, they had to be back in the building after their little afternoon break for our evening meetings and walkthrough. And then I was hearing about tornadoes touching down in Buffalo, and we said, you know, we're in the right place at the right time, because they all just got in the building. They're probably in the safest place in Buffalo, being underneath our stadium. And, you know, all our afternoon meetings went off without a hitch.
Your fourth time, Pete, as a first-year head coach with a new program. All the things that you have to do, new installation, new schemes, learn new players or whatever. How have you learned in those other 3 stops how to better manage and handle all that comes at you right now?
There's no cookie-cutter approach to it, because every place you go, the dynamics are a little bit different. The logistics are a little bit different. At some places, changing something might be as easy as flipping a light switch, and then something you did relatively easy at another stop at times might feel like moving a mountain. Staffs have different dynamics. You know, I always like to use the analogy of back in the 80s, which was a wonderful time to be growing up. And we had these stereos with all these red and green bars on them that were sort of like an equalizer. And my job is sort of to try to create equilibrium. And that's going to be different at every place and on every staff and with the dynamics of every team. And so I think trying to constantly evaluate and assess and provide feedback, and are there areas where I need to step in a little bit more and maybe have a little bit more of a presence? Are there other areas that not that everything's all well necessarily, but hopefully things are running a little bit more smoothly, where I don't have to put as much time, effort, and energy into those things. I think anytime you're in the first year, there are always going to be some surprises. That's inevitable, because you're doing some things for the first time. There's always going to be some kind of learning curve. But I think just knowing that those things can and will happen is helpful. And I think that's where having some experience and hopefully accumulated a little bit of wisdom through the years and on different stops along the way, working with some good people, kind of gives you hopefully some answers, you know, built into, you know, my desktop computer to say, okay, here's what we did in this situation, here's what we did in that situation, here's what we need a little more of, here's what we need a little less of, and continue to adapt along the way.
Coming out of the spring, and in the spring there were some positions you were thinner at than others. How do you feel about the overall depth and roster balance at this point?
Better. So, you know, a lot of people look at the negatives of the transfer portal, because they think about, you know, a connection with a certain player and then that player leaves, and I get it. It's as challenging on me as anybody, because I feel so strongly about the relationships that you have with your student athletes. But there's benefits to the transfer portal as well. And that is, when you do have a roster that's out of balance, you have some opportunities to then go look for some guys that might be able to help come in and solidify those positions of need. And obviously the most obvious one is Sean Dolak coming back at linebacker, and that was a position in the spring that we weren't sure we could make it through spring practice, to be quite honest, with the numbers that we had there. So to bring back a guy who is a very good player, experienced player, has great leadership, loves Buffalo, connects very well with his teammates, communicates extremely well, just gets it, sees the big picture, that's been a valuable addition right there. And then at that same linebacker position, we've brought in some young players, some good preferred walk-on type guys that are happy to be here and have added some depth to the roster. So, you know, you build your roster from the top down and the bottom up, and linebacker is one of those positions where All right, through the portal, we added a veteran player who's going to make us better right away. But through recruiting, we've added some young guys who are more developmental, but they're giving us better depth at that position, and we're having better quality practices because of it. Another very clear position of need coming out of spring was the defensive end or edge position. And Tone Coklaw from Monmouth and Malin White from Cornell have been two really, really good additions there. Two good guys, veteran guys. They've both played a lot of college football. They're both very different. One's more of an edge rusher type. The other's more of a sturdy, run defender. But two great guys, two guys that are going to give us two more quality special teams body types as well, and two guys that are grateful to be here. Sometimes you bring in a guy from the FCS and they get to a place like this with our facilities and our nutrition and even just the gear our guys get, and all of a sudden it's pretty eye-opening to them. Malin White, I feel like every day he walks in the building, he's got the biggest smile on his face of anybody on the team, even though he's a Cornell graduate, because he's like a kid in a candy store, with our facilities and our nutrition and our strength and conditioning, which is something that he's passionate about. So some really good additions for this team that have come in just as recently as this summer.
You've got the same kind of issue on the other side of the ball, particularly at wide receiver and running back. But you added Taji Johnson and J.J. Jenkins through the transfer portal. But how do those two positions, wide receiver and running back, how do they, for lack of a better term, compensate and learn on the fly for that lack of experience?
Sure. Well, experience is a big deal. There's no question about it. And, we were just talking about it relative to me and some of the things that I've seen and done over 33 years as a college coach. So I don't want to underestimate that at all. But I think those are two positions where you can get guys prepared in adequate time to go out and perform at a high level. Positions like the offensive line, quarterback, tight end, there's a lot of sophistication and nuance and experience is even more important at those spots. But I do think at running back, we have a group of guys who are talented and very complementary of each other. There's a lot of different personalities and body types in that room. Some bigger, sturdier guys, some smaller, kind of scat back kind of guys. And as we look at our team right now, we feel like our running back depth is very good. It's a very conscientious and very coachable group of guys. They enjoy being around each other. I think we're going to get a lot of special teams productivity out of the guys in that room. So while there may not be, a returning 1,000-yard rusher or something like that, or an all-conference player in that room, I do like that group, and I do think that there's a lot of potential there in that group. The wide receiver room at this point, I would say, is still a work in progress, and we're still very much evaluating those guys and trying to determine, who on day one will be starters, who will be rotational guys, who will be helping us on special teams. But I do think there's been improvement there since the spring. Nick McMillan continues to stand out, not just because he can make plays, but because he's very coachable, and he's a very hard worker, and he's willing to do the little things to help this football team, which is something that I enjoy about him every day. You asked about Taji Johnson, and the thing I appreciate about him is his veteran presence and perspective, his maturity. He's a Boston College grad. His mom went to UB. He's a very bright guy. He's immediately made an impact on this campus through community service, and he makes an impact in our building every day through his leadership. So he's a very steady guy. His speed has improved this summer. His hand-eye coordination is very good, and he's a big target. Another guy who's a big target is Chance Morrow. Chance has improved his ball skills since the spring, and he's starting to do some things that you would hope a bigger, longer receiver can do. And then the other thing that you didn't ask about, but we've got a really good tight end room. We've got some really good receivers in that tight end room led by Jake Orlando. And Jake's a very versatile tight end. There's several other tight ends that are similar body types to Jake that we can have attached, and in the core we can detach those guys. That gives us a lot of multiplicity. So the thing I like about our offense right now is that we can put a lot of different personnel groupings out there on the field and get into a lot of different formations and hopefully challenge defenses in terms of matchups.
You got a scrimmage Saturday?
We do practice 10.
Okay. Now, what is the goal of that scrimmage, and what do you want to see from your team, whether it's by unit or as a whole?
Sure. Well, everything you're doing right now is building up to the first game, and some of that is still making some decisions on personnel and hopefully getting closer to having some consistency and continuity to the units, right down to special teams units. You know, who are the first 11 guys going to be out there covering that first kickoff in that first game. So some of it is definitely personnel oriented. Some of it is getting our bodies physically ready to play a game. So first contact practice yesterday, we finished with one live period where we could get some real tackling. You want to have a couple scrimmages along the way where you can do more of that and put more of your players in those competitive situations where defensive guys have to get the ball on the ground, you know, just like they will on August 29th. So you want to get your team more physically ready and sort of build up to that first game. So let's just say that first game against Lafayette, there's 70 plays on offense, 70 plays on defense, and 25 plays on special teams. You want that scrimmage to not quite get to that number, but start to approach it so that as you get closer to game day, the guys know what to expect when the lights go on the 29th.
Have you seen any separation yet at the quarterback position? And kind of tied to that, is there ever a point in camp where you need it to be a two-person competition to kind of get the reps and figure that out?
Yeah, I would say the good news going into camp is that the reps are being less spread out than they would have been in the spring. So we are definitely getting a more thorough evaluation on the top 2 or 3 guys at this point. But I would say it's been back and forth, and different guys have emerged in different practices, and it's been good competition, and that makes everybody better. So hopefully there'll be a point in time this preseason where we come to peace and feel confident saying, all right, this is going to be our starter. This is the guy who puts us in the best possible position to win games, win the first game, all of those things. But in the meantime, there's enough reps to be spread around. We are still going 1s, 2s, and 3s. And it's good to see different players in different groups. You know, some days we'll come in and we'll change up depth charts just to see how different groups of guys mesh with each other, and quarterback is certainly a part of that.
There was different reasons as to why, but how important is it to get Dolak and Fuqua back to where they were 2 years ago when they were among the national leaders at their positions? How important is it? How much can your scheme maybe help that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. We want every guy to be the best version of themselves, and you know, a good coach is going to constantly look at how players are performing. Do we have them in the right spots? Are we asking them to do things that they're capable of doing? In other words, don't put a square peg in a round hole. And one of the nice things, much like I mentioned earlier about our offense and some of the versatility that guys have in the running back room, the tight end room, the receiver room, even up front on the offensive line where we've been cross-training some guys at different positions, I feel like we have some of that on defense as well. So somebody like Savion Brown is sort of a hybrid player who can play safety. He can play nickel. We could even move him in the box and play some will linebacker with him if it's, a certain personnel grouping on defense or if we're going up against a certain style of offense. So that's just one example, but I feel like we have some players right now that are bright, that want to learn our defense, not just one position, but learn the whole and then learn the nuances of multiple positions, but are still bright enough to see the big picture and where they fit in with those other 10 guys on the field. And that's a real positive for us right now because we're still trying to figure out who our best 11 are, who are the best guys to get out there in these different personnel groupings that we have on defense, and then also knowing that it's going to be a long season and that there are injuries and different opponents that present different challenges where you might want to get a different group of guys out there on the field. But we definitely have more competition than we had in the spring. And for somebody like Dolak or Fuqua, that's good because even though they may be older guys at the latter part of their career, when there's people around you that want those reps and are vying for that playing time, it really challenges everybody to be at their best.
What is this team's identity, or what do you want it to be come August 29th?
These guys are passionate. They're energetic. They enjoy being around each other. They want to be challenged. They want to be challenged physically and mentally. They like each other. They appreciate this university. They appreciate the support that they have from the athletic department and from campus. And those are all really, really good qualities. I've said this before. They inspire me every day. I told them last night after walkthrough, I said, I'm dragging a little bit after 6 days of camp, but you guys have plenty of energy out here. I said, that's awesome. That inspires me to be the best version of myself. So this is a high-quality group of people that I think represent this university extremely well on and off the field. And, yeah, I'm sure there'll be some angst when you go out there and have to put it all together in the first game. And we're playing a really good FCS team that won their league last year and almost won a playoff game against an elite FCS team. So we know we're going to have a huge challenge on our hands. But these guys want it. They want it. They're driven, and I think they know, and we've spoken very honestly about what some of the challenges have been for them in the past. And, we're trying to address those things and correct those things and put them in a position where they feel confident so they can go out there and put their best foot forward.
With the play, you weren't here a year ago, but the players that are back, how much sense do you get from them about wanting to prove something or event for anything that happened a year ago, and kind of what feedback do you get on that regard?
Yeah, we don't talk a whole lot about that portion. We do talk about some of the challenges they faced and the steps that we're going to take to try to fix those things. I mean, that's ultimately, I think, what my job is to be a problem solver and to put people in position to put a structure in place where everybody in the organization, from the coordinators right on down to the student managers, can be successful. And, there are challenging days and there are at times, some confrontational moments where you've got to address things to get them on the right track. But we don't harp on the past in a lot of ways. Even as recently as last night's team meeting, we talked about a couple things from my initial meetings with the players back in late January and my post-spring meetings with the players and ongoing conversations with our leadership council. So we don't ignore problems. We are trying to attack problems and fix problems, solve problems, but we're doing it in a very positive way, and it's not something where we're harping on the past. It's more about, hey, this is our plan going forward, and this is why we believe it'll be successful and put each and every one of our guys in a good spot to have a great season. So there's a lot of positivity surrounding how we are approaching those problems. We know problems are going to exist. Things are going to pop up. I mean, football reflects life in every way, shape, and form, but it's all how we go about solving those problems. And there's always a solution. Sometimes it's got to be a creative way to get it done. It's not just handed to you on a silver platter. But I like the mentality of this group. I do think we have competitive guys that are driven and their head coach has a little chip on his shoulder in a good way because, I come in here every day with something to prove mostly to myself that we can get a little bit better at what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I feel like these guys are approaching it very much the same way. And you know what? In December, we're going to look back and evaluate how this thing went. And hopefully we're sitting here saying we feel pretty good that this team reached its potential, whatever that potential might be. All right. Thank you, guys. Okay. Always a pleasure.